Welcome to Chapter 2 of Information Literacy. What is this thing called scholarship and why does it matter? Scholarship is a method of discovery and problem solving that uses well-defined methods. A scholar is someone who employs these methods to advance knowledge by meeting challenges and working towards solutions. There's a lot more variety and complexity to these definitions. Scholars belong to exclusive clubs. The position of being scholar is won by paying your dues in a scholarly activity until you're recognized as a scholar. It is essential to do this to keep scholarship at a high level. As a student, you will want to be able to navigate within scholarship. You learn to do this by knowing how to do your research projects. This is key to succeeding in higher education. Now, we're going to talk about some terms that deal with scholarship. Epistemology, methodology, and meta-narrative. Epistemology deals with the knowledge base within which a scholar of a certain discipline works. In other words, this is the foundational knowledge of a field. It deals with the whys of a field. The knowledge that scholars have is honored and protected. The knowledge will change over time, and some may be disputed by new ideas that come along. Scholars need to be confident that they have the discipline's best understanding of itself to that current moment. For you, as a student, this comes from the knowledge that you gain from your textbooks and lectures. The word meta-narrative comes from words meaning that which accompanies the narrative. The meta-narrative of a field forms what the scholars in the field think, say, and do. A certain discipline's meta-narrative will make sense to the scholars in that field. It defines the scholar and his or her work and is very significant. The meta-narrative of a field describes what a scholar values and determines the identity of individual scholars as part of that community. It provides the motivation to believe that the work that the disciplined scholars do is important. As a student, you need to attempt to understand the meta-narrative of your professors. The methodology of a field is its set of prescribed procedures for doing research. The basics of research are found in most disciplines. As a student, you need to understand how research is done in the subject area of study. The best way to learn this is to figure out the basics of research itself. Understand problem-based research, learn about specific information finding tools, learning how to use good methods for evaluating information, understanding the rules that writing has to follow in certain fields, read books and articles in your field, study them for content and method, and pay attention to what your professor asks you to do in research projects. So what if I don't want to follow these rules? You need to realize that any culture is going to have an old boy network that uncritically accepts premises and is resistant to change. Disciplines will still produce innovative and valuable work. As a student, you must learn to be critical. You need to do this by various methods. First, realize that research is a method of critical information literacy. It requires ongoing questioning and struggling for meaning. You need to get to know the discipline you're studying as well as its epistemology, meta-narrative, and methodology that define it. When you attempt to respond against it, be careful and choose your battles. There is plenty of room for critical information literacy if a student does it wisely. Look over the Prezi by William Badke. What is scholarship? There's a link on this week's page. William Badke's What is Scholarship? Authority is the ability of a scholar to have a reader or hearer trust what he or she is saying. A scholar is considered an expert when they can be trusted. The knowledge base of a field is always under revision. Many factors can limit the absolute authority of a scholarly statement. The culture of the reader or hearer, the extent to which the statement is believable in all situations, the amount of evidence behind the statement. Scholarship is very often a matter of competing claims of truth. A lot of scholarship is in flux, with the number of absolutes very small. As a society, we also are less trusting of experts. Authority is constructed of recognized at different levels of trust and value by different readers and hearers and their communities. We need to find ways to determine why you should trust authors and presenters. Authority is contextual. The trustworthiness of a piece of information may well depend on how or where the information is used, not just on the qualification of its user, of its creator. You need to evaluate information to determine if it meets our need and it is credible. Not all information is created equal, and not all information is relevant for whatever problem you're trying to address. It must suit the context. You must determine how much authority you need to enlist for yourselves to back up what you're trying to say with your research. Research is a matter of long and sometimes agonizing developments. The process takes time. It has stages and often requires several versions. How a piece of work appears in the final form, how a piece of work has been assembled, is as often as important as how it appears in its final form. The amounts and kinds of research and the amount of gatekeeping determines the level of authority that a piece of information has. You need to think about the processes required in your own creating of information to ensure that it meets the needs your audience expects. The kind of venue an author chooses for publication also speaks to how it is developed. What the reader finally sees has gone through its own unique creation process, and the process says a lot about a work's authority and usefulness. It's not as difficult as you might think to tell the difference between a scholarly article and a popular one. First, find out if the article was peer-reviewed. Does it come from a scholarly publisher? Finally, look at the background of the author to determine whether they are used to doing solid scholarship. Information has value. Monetary value is just one aspect of that. Information can be extremely expensive. It gets complicated when you try to compare the value of different types of information. The value of a piece of information may determine whether someone will have access to that information that they need. There are times that the value of information that has been translated into money puts it out of the reach of many individuals. A piece of information's value is often measured by the cost of an item, the importance of the information to the user, to the owner, and the contribution the item makes to society. Knowing about the value of information enables you to be more aware with what you research and to appreciate the access to that information and the value of the information that you access. The open access movement has become very important. Access to information is governed by rules to ensure that authors are reasonably paid and recognized. Copyright protects authors from other people simply stealing their work. Even in an open access format, information is ultimately never free. Someone still must pay for the information. For example, universities and colleges paying a fee to fund access to it. The Open Access Network is the latest attempt to pull together open access items of information in scholarly publishing to make publications that will be made free to everyone. Research is about discovery. It begins with discontent over a situation, a desire to solve a problem, or to make a better world. It is really a problem addressing exercise that makes an inquiry taking you from an issue to a possible resolution. You'll be learning how to formulate problems statements in the form of research questions or thesis statements, how to evaluate and use found information, along with your own critical thinking in order to solve your problem. Most ideas come up through history of earlier versions of these ideas. There's little that is unique. When someone comes up with something new, a process of interaction with others also working in the field begins. This interaction involves a conversation that includes agreeing, disagreeing, supporting modifications. A conversation history is formed. Ideas are batted back and forth, and progress is made eventually. The American Library Association's Information Literacy Framework states that research is scholarly and professional fields is a discursive practice in which ideas are formulated, debated, and weighed against one another over extended periods of time. Knowledge is not one static thing, but it is changing all the time. Scholars are always looking for the next big thing. The active give and take of knowledge as it develops is the very essence of how it all works. You need to make sure to have more than you need to make sure to include that conversation in your research. And that's why you have more than one resource in your sources. These resources and your research captures the major voices into the conversation that occurs with your research. Searching in research is a strategic exploration. Google has led us to the false notion that searching for information is easy. Finding what you really need is hard. Your search for information must be strategic. Library-based databases are often the best means to accomplish this. Good searches are based on clearly stated research problem, usually in the form of a question. The question tells the information that you are seeking and helps to define the type of information you're going to need. It can help you to be effectively planned for how you are going to locate the resources. When you know how to use research tools and resources, the search strategies become a lot clearer. So, who oversees determining what is academic and scholarly? Scholarship is determined by a specific set of individuals. Each discipline and subdiscipline have its own scholars who set the rules for how their discipline works. There are established methods for recognizing scholarly works. The main methods of knowing whether a piece of information is scholarly or academic is that some form of peer review has been done with the piece of information. This is when one scholar reviews the works of another, a scholar citing another scholar. Other methods of determining whether an item is academic or scholarly is that the creator of the information has been invited to speak at a conference in the field, or that other scholars accept the views and ideas of the creator. Writing is considered scholarly if other scholars see it as scholarly and it meets the standards of the discipline. As a student, you should look to see if the material has been published in an academic journal. Is it peer-reviewed? Has it been published by a discipline, recognized publisher? Is the author qualified to speak about the information in that field? As always, when you're in doubt, ask a professor in the field or your friendly local librarian. We'll see you next time for Chapter 3.